Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Um, that was a wonderful screening. I thought we could begin at the start with the script, which you, Ronan, and Daniel co-wrote. Could you tell us when that happened and how you decided to collaborate first as writers?
Yeah, well, I'll start and then you can give your version of it. But yeah, I had kind of had this idea for years of wanting to explore the kind of archetype of brotherhood and that sort of the beauty and tragedy that can kind of live in that dynamic. And I wasn't really sure what the way in was. Like I was thinking at first it might be more of a coming of age story or something. But then my dad and I had this conversation where he expressed a desire to, find a project that we could lock into together. And after a couple of years of kind of casting around for ideas, it turned out that he independently had this kind of impulse to make something about, dive into a world that had to do with brotherhood and the kind of silence that can exist between brothers and all the different kind of connotations that silence can have. And so we just started very low stakes, kind of bouncing ideas back and forth. And the idea of this guy, Ray, who's kind of existing in this state of self-banishment almost, where he's living in this extremely isolated situation, and his brother, after 20 years of no contact, turns up mysteriously at his doorstep, sort of came to us first without us knowing anything about their entangled kind of backstories or why he had estranged himself in the first place. And yeah, we didn't outline or anything. It was a very kind of intuitive process with a lot of improvising, and we would only work on it when we were in the same place. So it sort of came together gradually over a few years, but I'm sure you have something to add.
Really covers it, I think.
What was it about the theme of brotherhood that was interesting to you? Ronan said that you had been thinking about it as well.
I had, yes. I'm not quite sure where that how that interest arose in me, but not having had maybe something to do with the fact of having had three boys and having watched them growing up and their interactions as brothers. So certainly the fascination on sort of just in that very personal level was there. And then some years ago, I read a couple of books by Kent Haruf called Plainsong and Eventide, which had a very strong impact on me. And they're set in a small community in the west of this country, and you get to know a lot of the people in this community. But there were two bachelor brothers, ranchers, that I was fascinated by, who lived almost in complete silence with each other. They loved each other, but they really had no reason to speak. And that was one of the things that Ronan and I both, I think, felt strongly about, the element of shared silence that siblings can have. A kind of tacit understanding that they can have. In this case, it's complicated by the fact that, in a way, they no longer know each other. So there's also a silence that is more, the silence of time past, time missed, as well.
Yeah, Ronan, you described it as a pretty organic writing process, and you said improvising. What did that involve? Were the two of you just bouncing lines off of each other, taking turns playing each part, or how did that work?
It was more him playing playing parts. But yeah. We would kind of like at a certain point, really early on, he started speaking as Ray, and it was this really it was this amazing experience where I started to see the character come alive before I even really knew fully who he was. But I could see these kinds of there was so much that kind of became clear to us immediately as he started to kind of inhabit him, and same with Jem. But we would start to kind of bounce. Like we would kind of put the characters in a scenario, and then we'd start sort of talking through it, and we'd start to kind of improvise in that way, or my dad would start to improvise, and then I would sort of, prompt us in a different direction, or consider like how one character might react if the other character does this. And it was like it was literally character led, where we were kind of following them through the dark, like from one scene to the next. And Yeah, I think it helped them become very real to us, like, very early on, which sort of gave the narrative decisions we made a lot of conviction, I think, more than in my past experience, like a first draft would have.
And initially, we'd imagined that somehow we could keep it contained, and that was really, it was just for to have the experience of working together, that we began. But after like living for a couple of years with just these two brothers in a shed, you know, we had to get out of there, and the characters we only sort of knew about them a little bit through the brothers, but then we just craved to spend some time with Nessa and Brian, and became more of a focus then.
Yeah, like I think the first time we spent a scene alone with Brian was a huge turning point. Yeah.
I'd love to bring Sean into the conversation, and because you.
Thank you very much.
Jem is obviously an important part of the film, and I'm wondering if you knew who you had in mind. At what point did you think of Sean, and was it something that both of you talked about, Ronan and Daniel?
Yeah, we kind of immediately thought of Sean, and then we couldn't think of anyone else. Like it just felt like no one else could be Jem. So he was the first person we approached, and we were kind of on tenterhooks, and we were pretty delighted that he.
Yeah, if he hadn't done it, we'd still be waiting for him.
Yeah.
Sean, I'm curious to hear it from your point of view. I mean, what was it like to enter into this project that sounds like it had this very intimate beginning? It's a film about family. You're working with father and son, and yeah, I'm just curious how you fit into it.
I guess it's. I was a kind of a newcomer in the sense that you guys have been working on it for a few years, and but I soon kind of figured out, or began to figure out what the relationship was, especially between Daniel and myself as the two brothers, and Daniel was kind enough to invite me over to Ireland, didn't you? And met me at the airport, and we'd not really seen each other before. I think I went up for the Last of the Mohicans a long time ago. I didn't get the part, but it's all right. I met him. Anyway, so I met him, and so we came over and we got on like a house on fire. It was great. It's like there were no airs and graces, and we just got down to business really, which consisted of like going to the pubs and having pints of Guinness and then coming back for a little whiskey afterwards and talking about the script, which was great. It's always a good way to explore a situation, and and we got on very well, and that was crucial to me. It was such an important part of getting my head around this story and the relationship between the two brothers. And I was obviously very flattered when Daniel called me and said, "Are you interested in this script?" And of course. and we kind of took it from there, and both Daniel and Ronan were very welcoming to me on set and very generous, and created a wonderful working environment. He's such a warm and gentle man, and he's obviously very focused and very talented. So I felt very much at home, and we kind of took it from there, really.
You talked about Ray's voice emerging through the writing process. I'm wondering, was there a particular moment that voice just crystallized for you? There are some very memorable monologues in the film, and actually the first time we hear Ray speak at length, it is the Guinness and curry monologue.
Yeah.
Did that come early? I guess did that come early in the writing process? Was that part of Ray's voice?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny because I was gonna, even if you hadn't brought that up, I was gonna say that when I think about Ray being born as a character, it was when that monologue appeared. Yeah, it was very early on, and it felt like Ray sort of announcing himself to us, and I think in the film, it's him announcing himself to Jem, but also him announcing himself to the audience, because up until that point, we're sort of starved for any detail about him. It's almost like a silent film up until that point. So yeah, I think it's yeah, and also kind of the film announcing itself tonally in many ways. Yeah.
Daniel, where did that monologue come from?
I honestly don't know. And I don't know how else to say this, but it did come out very quickly. It was just like it came out as a fully formed thing that,
Lava.
you know, there's no way, like once I'm in this, there's no way out.
Right.
And then Ronan and I looked at it and thought, well, now what? Like, it's like, where do we go from there? So it definitely, it kind of took us both by surprise. I was going to say, relating to your first question, Dennis, that, the thing about, that we were talking out loud, that we were improvising, talking out loud, and there is an advantage to that because scripts are obviously on a page, and they're not necessarily written. I mean, they're written with the spoken word in mind, but when you actually start to try and bring a script to life, sometimes the words on the page, don't quite feel. Do you know what I mean? They don't quite feel that they have the necessary flow to them of the spoken word, and so Ronan was constantly making adjustments as we carried on, sort of speaking out loud. But by the time we reached the end of it, the entirety of it, we felt it sounded all right to us. It looked all right on the page, but it sounded all right.
Were you thinking about visual ideas and formal choices already as you were writing? Was it something you both talked about? I mean, I think it's a film that makes some pretty interesting formal choices. It's, in some ways more of an expressionist than realist register that you're working in. And I also wonder if that has something to do with your other career as a painter.
Yeah, I think from the beginning, like the first scene I remember us writing was discovering Ray in the clearing, and that shot, that kind of visual mode of discovering was already written into the script in terms of, the camera emerging from the forest and sort of gliding through his environment and then almost into the back of his head. And I think that first formal choice that was in the script really ended up informing a lot about the camera language and the kind of visual language once it came time to kind of design the film and talk to the heads of department. And I think also even in the first 10 pages, the weather revealed itself as a really kind of potent aspect of or like a character. I mean, it sounds like such a cliche, but a character in the film that was almost like the wind was almost like a kind of narrator, and there was a ton of rain even in those first 10 pages. And it was just very clear that the whole film kind of had to feel like there was a storm cloud sort of hovering over it and kind of pressing down on the characters. And that was definitely really informative from the beginning. And I think I think definitely the paintings I've been doing over the last few years as we were writing the script increasingly started to inform the way I was thinking about it visually. And there were certain kind of obsessions I was working through with the paintings in terms of extreme weather. Like I did this series of tornado paintings and just different kind of imagery that I think I realized more and more, even like as we were shooting it, actually how much overlap there was.
I'm wondering, before you started writing, had you, both of you, Ronan and Daniel, collaborated in any way? Did you?
Yeah, we had done some like kind of informal collaborations. We had done, there was this big sculpture of the creature actually that appears in the film that I made for a art show a few years ago that my dad helped. I kind of printed out these pieces of the infrastructure, and it was going to be this massive wax sculpture. And he helped me kind of assemble the pieces of it, and because it was this kind of massive unwieldy thing, and paint it and everything, and smear wax all over it. And that was like a whole bonding experience. And then yeah, there's other things. We made like a fake Nike commercial starring my pet tortoise when I was like 16.
Why didn't you send us that?
I know, I should have.
I'm curious what it was like to work together. Obviously, you know, you making your first film, you know, quite an intimate film, but also I think one that is quite ambitious in many ways, directing your father. And Daniel also returning to acting after a break. I mean, you've taken breaks before over the years, but I'm also curious what it's like each time you come back to it, and in this case, coming back in, you know, such a specific way, working with Ronan.
I don't think that I've ever gone to work without feeling that that I'm starting from scratch every time. I really just don't know how. Not sure I know how to do this. Going back to my very beginning, like I just always began with that feeling of uncertainty, but at the same time, the work that goes on beforehand is, for me, like if it works as it should do, that by the time you arrive on a set and there's a camera there, it's not a confrontation with this object, and then all the paraphernalia of filmmaking, which can be, you know, if you don't find a way to ignore it, a huge distraction from what you're doing. So I'd always worked in such a way that I felt as if day one of the shoot should be like a continuation of something that's already started a long time ago. For me personally, usually that's just a rather solitary part of the process, but in this case, that happened quite naturally because Ronan and I, you know, it felt just like a continuation of what we'd already done, and yeah.
Yeah, I think like he was saying, having the chance to, it's so rare to basically be able to prepare together for 4 years, and I think writing it together, the scenes and the kind of emotional trajectory of the film and the characters were kind of, and Ray was kind of growing alongside us for such a long time that by the time we got to set, we had so many of these extremely detailed conversations about each scene that it was really helpful to kind of not have the pressure, because, you know, with the time pressure on set, you never are able to have as deep a conversation as you'd like.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I want to thank and congratulate all of you for this beautiful film.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.